Welcome to the 2024 spec book changes for item 100. We have traveled the state to several different locations giving this presentation in person. Along with those presentation came lots of good jokes, lots of good laughs, and lots of good interaction with contractors and designers across the state. Now we come to you that we're unable to make it that presentation and give that to you in a video here on this TxDOT link. So thank you for joining us to go through the 100 item series changes for the 24 spec book. This presentation is going to skip all the intro jokes and all the funny one-liners that we had at the presentations, and we're going to go straight to the meat of the material and talk about the changes that we've made for the 2024 spec book. We'll get started. First off, we have the 100 series prep right-of-way item. In these items, when we went through, one of the first things the team did with the AGC and the TxDOT members is we looked at all the special specifications that were used around the state for each individual item and found the ones that looked like they were commonly used that could be best served rolled from the special specification into the standard specification. And one of those items that we have is the first one up on prep right away is tree protection. That's a commonly used item, especially here in the Austin district. As you can see in the picture in the top right, we like to put a fence around the trees and protect our trees here in the Austin area. And so we incorporated a tree protection standard into the 2024 spec book. One of the other things we look at here in TxDOT is we want to say it once and we want to say it right. The tree trimming and pruning language was actually in the 2014 spec book was stated once in prep right away, and it was stated again in item 752. We decided to only say it once, and we're going to say it once in item 752. So we have referenced that information in the 100 item for prep right away. We'll move on to disposal of wells. As you'll see in the 100 series, a lot of things in the 100 series did not change. Dirt is dirt, rocks are rocks, wells are wells, and you can see we had no significant change to disposal of wells. And there'll be several items that have no significant changes. And you'll see that as we move on to item 104, removing concrete. Again, the removal of the concrete hasn't changed much over the period of time other than the type of equipment we use to remove the concrete. So we have an item there for no significant changes on item 104. We'll move on to removal asphalt and base. Again, removal work has not really changed other than the type of equipment that we use. So no significant changes to the actual spec language. However, along with looking at special specifications, we look at some of the pay abilities and the pay measurements that we've been using across the state. And one of the things we noticed is a lot of engineers and designers like to pay for this by the square yard and also in a range of depth. So we've created several ranges to allow the engineers and designers to pick a range that best fits their project. Because we know when contractors and inspectors get out on the job, an 18-inch pavement section shown on a sheet from the 1950s may not be 18 inches anymore. And so we give those engineers the ability to select a range that best fits their job and what they believe is out there in the field, and maybe the cores they've taken during the design process that tells them the pavement depth. We'll go on to the next slide. You can see here in item 106, obliterating roadway. Again, we created the ability to pay by the square yard based off the usage we had since 2014 in the previous specification. Again, another one here is the adjectives are revised. You'll see that quite a bit here in our specification changes for the 100 series. In this situation, we changed the term uniform and replaced it with the term scarifying blend. So ask yourself, what does uniform mean to me? And is it different than scarifying blend? In some situations, that may be the same definition. In some situations, it may be different. I would recommend that each TxDOT inspector and contractor in the field discuss the meaning of scarifying blend before they begin performance of this work. So when you get to the end product, both parties involved in the field have an expectation of what to expect from the contractor and their performance of the work. So again, when you see these terms and we've made a revision, we believe that provides clarification, but there still may be an opportunity, and there should be an opportunity for discussion in the field, so that way all parties are aware of the performance of their work and how it's getting performed. We'll move on to excavation. Again, no significant changes. The equipment may have changed, but digging dirt is still digging dirt, so no changes there on excavation. We'll move on to item 112, subgrade widening. Again, we created the ability to pay by the square yard, which wasn't allowed, I think, in our 2014 spec, but it seemed to be something that would be useful for the 2024 specifications. Again, here on the second bullet, adjectives revised. Smooth vertical has been replaced with vertically uniform. Again, what does that mean to you? What does it mean to me? May be different. We had a common agreement on our task force on what it should be. However, you need to make sure that you have a common agreement on your project on what vertically uniform means. So that way nobody's surprised when somebody's finished with the work. You'll see as we go through here in this slide presentation, you'll see some text in red. That text is really focused on the engineers and the designers that are preparing the plans. Some things that I felt when I prepared this presentation, they should take note of and consider accommodating when they develop their plans. For instance, in the item 112, you may be performing some embankment in a phase, but not have enough excavation to create the material needed for the embankment. We recommend you consider adding a token quantity of embankment, so at bid time, that contractor provides you a price in case there's a need for an additional embankment on the job. You have an established price where they can deliver that material to you. As you can see down here in the specification language at the bottom, if you do not have embankment, that work will be performed in accordance with force account, which can be maybe difficult, but maybe the right way to go. But if you get a bid price up front and let the contractor know there may be a need for additional embankment, that may be the best approach for providing a good set of plans for bidding. We'll move on to item 132. Did not include intelligent compaction as a standard. That was a special specification that we did elect to leave out of the 2024 spec book. So if you decide to use intelligent compaction, you will need to still include that special specification in your plans. Another situation that we've come across quite a few times, and a lot of it has to do with debates in the field on what to do with the material and what was expected, is if you're adding embankment on top of existing pavement. A lot of times you're going to build a bridge in the middle of a rural area where there wasn't a bridge before. You're probably going to add embankment on top of an existing pavement. And some TxDOT inspectors, some contractors had different opinions on what should happen to that existing pavement. Should you scarify it? Should you bow mag it? Should you mill it up? Or did you just put dirt right on top of it? Well, we've added some language that if TxDOT would like something done with that existing pavement structure, we should add a pay item for that and tell the contractor exactly what we want to avoid that debate in the field on what should happen with that pavement. The next bullet there you see in random, use of random, next bullet you see in random, actually the next bullet you see in the slide is not random, but there will be a requirement for random locations for density testing. There's more information in that, and you can find that in the 200 series presentation because that also applies to some items in the 200s. And like we said earlier, we want to say it once and we want to say it right. So we're going to say it one time in the 200 presentations. We'll move on to the next one about proof rolling requires payment as it did in 2014. A lot of discussions go on in the field about proof rolling. What's the proper equipment to use for proof rolling? There's a lot of debates on proof rolling. The language has not changed. And so we just make a recommendation that you just consider that a designer and what you want in the field, that you account for the way the text is written in the specification. And then we go on down to the bottom again, some more red text for some designers to consider. One of the things that you can consider doing is preparing a type C material that is specific to your district and maybe common to your district. And that way, when contractors bid a job, the type C material is always the same. And then if you have an engineer that needs something a little more specific, they can use, like it says there on the third dot, type C1 or C2. Some districts commonly use a type C material and they call it a commercial base, like that you would lose in a commercial industry, and not maybe as stringent a requirement as we have for our TxDOT flexible base. And so they want a type C material that is what they call a commercial base for embankment. And we have that consistent in some districts. That way, every time a designer or a bidder uses type C material, it's consistent in your district. So just consider that for your engineers. Read the text in red. And again, that fourth bullet down includes scarify and rework item 251 for pavement that remains. A lot of times the inspector wants them to bow mag that existing pavement before they put embankment on top of it. And again, as we discussed earlier up on the screen in the slide presentation, is to pay for that work that you want performed on the job. Now we'll move on to item 134, backfill pavement edges, created the ability to pay by the cubic yard or the linear foot. We defaulted to the table there on the bottom right, table 19 for the emulsion. In the Austin district, we like to apply emulsion to that backfill pavement edge. It helps hold it together. It also promotes grass growth. And so we've actually defaulted to the type to be used to table 19. That way we don't have to specify a specific oil. And if you fail to specify a specific oil, one will be specified for you through table 19. Again, some more information here in red for you designers out there when you're preparing a set of plans. Great item included all overlay projects for those run off the road accidents. You don't want to create that lip that could be dangerous. So consider including backfill pavement edges in your overlay projects. Maybe apply a default emulsion rate in your plan. So that way the contractor, every job they bid, they know how much they're going to shoot on that emulsion if you want emulsion. And then maybe consider applying a default type A material for your district that's standard to your district. A lot of jobs like to allow the use of wrap, flexible base, or reclaimed base. And so if you have something standard you like in your district, or maybe want to broaden what they can use on that material, consider adding a district-wide general note to specify the type A material for backfill pavement edges. Then again, here we have the 150, the 1 through 158 items for equipment. No significant changes. Equipment, still equipment. Not a lot of use on these items from 2014. However, we decided to keep it in the 2024 spec. There was some use, so we didn't see the need to combine or delete these. So they will have no significant changes and they will remain as is. Move on to the dirt part, topsoil, the dirt and grass. Again, here you see adjectives revised. The term cultivate, that may mean something to a farmer and it may mean something different to a contractor. We replaced that with the word scarify. Again, meet out in the field, have that conversation, define what you think scarify is with your contractor so everybody knows what to expect when the work is completed. Got some more text here in red for those engineers to take a look at when you're designing a set of plans. Testing beyond pH should be requested by the district's general notes. Some districts like to test for a percent of organics. We thought about making that a default test in the 2024 spec, but we elected not to. So if you're a district, maybe in a sandy soil area, and you want to test for organics, you would need to add that by general note. Compost is still compost, no significant changes on the compost, item 161. Moving on to sod, again, you here see cultivate was changed to scarify. Have a discussion. What does that mean before you put the sod down? That way the sod doesn't show up and you're still debating on what that dirt should look like before you place the sod. We'll move on to item 164, the seed. Again, you see the same conversation needs to be had before placing seed. Went through and we actually revised, we have all new seed tables, TxDOT, TTI, at A&M. A lot of folks got together and discussed the seeds that are really available in Texas. Are they native and are they available? Had a lot of seeds in the 2014 spec that were not available, and we were having to do a lot of substitutions. So we went back and revisited that and developed all new seed tables in the spec book. Broadcast seed requires 25% increase. And then we added notes regarding substitute. Still, oftentimes we have a seed that is not available and we need to substitute that. So we added some language to clarify that. So the bidders know, or when they get to the situation in the field and they can't find it, they know what to do with that situation. One of the things we added, this may be not necessarily for the engineers to look at, it is in red, but it's really just calling it out because it is different. It's one of the bigger changes we made this year in the 100 series, is we added a flower mix that's included in every seeding mix. It's not your wildflower mix, but there is a flower mix that we've added as table 5. You can see here at the bottom of the screen, that second sentence on the bottom of the screen text, include flower seeding mix in accordance with table 5, with seeding mixes shown in table 1 and 2. So you'll see the seeding mix here on the right-hand side of the page. You're going to dump that in with your grass seeding mixes. So that way we could do our part here in Texas to help, I guess, with allergy season and moms taking pictures in the spring and just the wildflowers generally in Texas everybody loves. We want to do our part here at TxDOT with that flower seeding mix. And so we've made it a standard in our seeding mix. We'll move on to 164 in the actual in-person presentations. This was a good slide. Left open some folks that were maybe in the hot mix or the electrical industry or the concrete industry. Some of those golfers could try to guess what they thought the toughest 9 holes in Texas were. You'll see the answer to that slide on those answers to that question on the next slide, because I think the text here is too small to read. Back to the 100 series items, you have the 166. We did have no changes in the 166. Fertilizer is still fertilizer and no changes there. The one change we made on 168 is trying to clarify the confusion on mega gallons. A lot of times there's a misunderstanding that a mega gallon is 1,000 gallons, and we have a lot of times we issue a set of plans and the quantity for watering is excessive. 20,000 mega gallons is a lot more water than 20,000 gallons. And so we're trying to clarify that by use of TGL. So we hope that clarifies that by that changing of that unit of measure from mg to TGL. Let's see if that gets that cleared up for the mega gallons to 1,000 gallons. And here we go on this slide. We got the answers to the toughest 9 there on the right-hand side for you. But this is the soil blanket slide presentation. Got a whole new product list that they've created in partnership. They, being TxDOT and TTI, have created in partnership. And that is out there actually available for use right now. You can go through there and select. It's really a picture. It's really nice picture prompted. You click on buttons and it points you to the soil blanket that meets your conditions. So got a new list out there. Many of you probably already used it because it has been available for some time. With that, we've actually added a wildlife category that you can actually filter down to in that new product list. And on the top right of your screen here, you see a soil blanket that actually has a wildlife designation. There's a need in TxDOT to be friendly and be protective of our wildlife. And there's situations where we need to be considerate of snakes, toads, and things of that nature. And the job may require the use of a wildlife friendly blanket. And there will be a bid item for that. And then there'll be a blanket that you can find that meets that in the product list. And then down on the bottom right-hand screen, we have a lot of environmental folks that really would prefer a spray blanket in some applications. And so we have a payout on that specifically for spray blankets. So that way TxDOT, if they want to eliminate the option to use spray versus a rolled blanket, we can do that by specifying a spray blanket application. We'll move on to irrigation. Contractor can provide the design for the system. And I think this was already pretty well taken care of, but we clarified in the spec, the water consumed is paid by the department. And the one thing we have added is a performance period. It ends 30 days after plant installation is complete. Added an operation requirement. And both of those, this language for the performance period and operation is at the bottom of the screen here if you'd like to read that. And then we created a 2-step payment structure for initial and final payment, 95% up front when it's installed, and then again 5% when the performance period is complete. Move on to item 180. Again, this is different than the table 5 seeding flower seed mix. This is the actual wildflower seeding item. I think if you go back, you won't see blue bonnets in that flower seeding mix, but this is where you would get your blue bonnets added and your specialty wildflowers added if you're TxDOT. There were no significant changes to this spec. It still remains for TxDOT to use as they've done before. We'll move on to item 192, the landscape planning. We added 2014 special spec items. Again, we combed through all the special specs to see what was some common use across the state that should be incorporated into the standard specifications. We've got tree transplants, loose aggregate, and soil amendment seem to be a common item we used here at TxDOT. And so we made those standard specification items for the 2024 edition. And then we adjusted the payment percent for plants. There's a lot of cash that it takes to get the initial work installed, get the plants installed, a lot of outlay of cash by a contractor up front. So we restructured that in cooperation with the AGC to make sure that contractors funded up front for the amount of work they've got to do up front to actually get this landscape planning installed. So that's now a 70-10-10-10 split. And then we'll move on to the last slide of the presentation. We've got landscape establishment. Again, just clarifying that water consumed will be paid by the department. Then that we just copied the language from the electrical service item back in, I think it's a 700 series. We just cut and paste that into here so that way it matches for utilities. And then the last item we added is actually the new one to the specification. It's roadside amenities. Went through the special specification, saw a lot of situations where folks were writing special specifications for wheel stops. There's actually more than one wheel stop special specification. So I didn't think there was more than one type of wheel stop in the state of Texas. They all stopped my car, but apparently there are different wheel stops requested, I guess, depending on where you're at. And so we decided to roll this in, but leave it generic enough where you can still define a specific wheel stop to your area without having to create a special specification. You can see some generic items on the bottom right hand of the screen that were commonly used that are now going to be standard items. And then when you're ready to put this item in the plans, you can then just describe that or include the plans for that item into your plans versus having to request a special specification. You can go and gather third-party entities. A lot of TxDOT builds maybe bus stops, and we may do some work in the city parks or in the state parks actually. And so we can actually roll their plans in and then just pick an item that accommodates that item of work without having to cut a special specification for that. So that was the intent of 194, to handle your trash can, your benches, your boulders, and your wheel stop. So with that, that wraps up all the changes to the 100 series. Thank y'all for joining me.